Okay, so we're going to go through the startup of the MiG-19P Farmer Interceptor. To start with, some of these gauges and sections of the cockpit have low lighting, and you might want to turn on your flashlight. To do that with the left Alt and L, you can turn on the flashlight so you can see a little bit better in some of these corners. The first thing we want to do is check our cockpit to make sure it's clean, because it's easier to see things whether they're in place or out of place when it's pretty much clean. It normally starts pretty clean, but I just do a quick check to make sure things are where they're supposed to be. Okay. Alright, we're going to check first. As you can see, the landing gear here. You want the landing gear lever in the neutral position, which it is, and you want to make sure that this locking mechanism, or the latch lock, is in the down position. This keeps the landing gear from being operated, so you don't end up putting your aircraft on the concrete accidentally. Okay, so that's in the neutral position, and the latch is on, so that's good. Now, there are two buttons on the throttle assembly of the MiG-19. One is for military only power, and one is for afterburners. You want to check for their operation. I like to hit the afterburner one first, just to make sure it operates, because later on we're going to want only military or normal power, not afterburner power. And so I usually hit that one second, just in case I forget later on. So those two working properly. Next, we're going to go to the circuit breaker panel. It's right back over here. This panel opens. Now, as the aircraft loads, they're usually all set to on. But in case you shut down yourself and want to restart, you can verify that these are set to on or up, or in case one of them has been switched because of an error and then you repaired, just make sure they're all up. So you close that back up. Okay. Now, over here on the left panel, we have a couple 4 switches. Now, when you go through an automatic start or you spawn your aircraft already running, these are normally off, but for the startup procedure, we want them on. So for the emergency afterburner disconnect, we want them both on. And we also want the engine oil cutoff valves both on for the right and left engines, respectively. So those are on. After we get it started, we can turn it off, and I can't remember right offhand. I'll figure it out as we go along. The afterburner cutoff switch might actually not allow us to hit afterburner when we do our engine tests. If that's the case, we'll just switch them back off, and then we'll do the engine test. Now, to the right of the pilot seat, you have a lever right here. In the back position, the cockpit is pressurized. So we want it in the forward position, and also we want the cockpit ventilation on to start with. So those are on. Then you want to come up here and you want to make sure that your clock is set. I have it set in the special settings for the MiG-19 under DCS to set it automatically to the mission time. So I just usually left click, it sets the time. Then I right click twice to start it, and then I use that to kind of check my seconds as it runs. I don't bother turning it on and off. Then you want to go to your altimeter, you want to zero it out, and then if you look down here, it has your millimeters of mercury setting here. This should correspond to the airfield you're at. Where we're at currently, it's supposed to be 749.98 millimeters mercury, which is approximately that. So that's set. And then we're going to go over here and make sure that the aileron hydraulic switch is on. It's on. It's forward. Okay. Now we're going to turn on our oxygen. This is for the cockpit as well as our suit. So we're just going to turn that on, and we're going to set the oxygen to mix and to auto. So that's there, and then we're going to go over here and make sure this is in the up for cockpit heating to auto. Now, At this point in time, we're going to provide power to the aircraft. You can do it just by battery power, but I like to do it through the ground crew just because I do. So I'm going to contact the ground crew and we're going to have them apply ground power.
Подключить питание. Принял.
Okay, once we have ground power, or in case you don't have ground power,
Командир, наземное питание подключено.
we're going to turn on the battery switch here. This should start giving energy or electricity to the cockpit. Okay, so that's on. Now once that's on, you're just going to take a look at the lights that come on. I'm going to move my throttle or my stick out of the way so we can see. Okay, you should see these warning lights on. This is for your generators for your left and right engine, your oil low pressure lights for both engines, and then your hydraulics low pressure light. You're also generally going to see this. This is for your ARU stabilization system. This comes on when it's in the landing and takeoff configuration. This is for the trimmer of the elevator, and this one for the ailerons. That'll come up later. You want to check to make sure that your landing gear lights are all illuminated down, which is what our aircraft should be, landing gear down on the ground. And then right over here, if you can see, is the lamp test button. Hold that down, make sure all the gear up lights come on, the retract gear warn light is on, flaps deployed lights on, and the air brake deployed lights on. You can see they're all working. Okay, next we're going to test the fuel tank lights and the engine fire light. That's down here on the left panel. This is the lamp test for your tanks. Okay, the right one will tell you when tank number 2 is empty. This left one tells you when tank 3 and 4 are empty. If you're wondering about tank 1, that will show up on your warning panel over here when you're low on fuel, and then you can consult your manual to know how much fuel you have depending on your speed and how far you can go or how long you can go. So we check that, and we know everything's working the way it's supposed to. Now we're going to go back to the left panel here, and to the rear of the throttle assembly here, you've got your starter panel here. These are to start the left and right engines. This is for air start. What you're going to do is you're going to turn them on and make sure that the warning lights come on when they're set to on. So you notice right there the left engine air start has turned on, and then the right, both of them are on. If they work, great. Turn them back off and release the cover. So we know that works. Now we're going to go to our radio here, and there are 3 switches we're initially going to turn on. Your emergency arc radio, which is for navigation. It's all NDB, by the way. Your emergency AGI, which is over here. Sorry, here. This is your GIC. And then your regular radio power. Once that's on, you can contact the tower if you'd like. You can wait later if you want. That's fine too. But for right now, we're going to just go ahead and do that just because that's what I'm going to do. Right now, I have channel 2 set to this tower, so we're going to get to channel 2. Okay, so channel 2 is set, and we're going to ask permission at this time to start up just because I don't want to be bothered here in a minute.
Бандерленге, 100-й, запуск.
Okay, when you get permission, I mean, just knows you can get things going the way you want. Next, we're going to turn on our beacon receiver, which is for your NDBs. It tells you when you cross over the outer and inner NDBs on airfields. as well as your radar warning altimeter. Put that on. Once that's on, you can go over here and set it to what you want it to be set for. I normally set it to 250 meters just because when you turn on the final, that's the altitude about which you should be when you're coming into land. So that's on, it's set. And also back here again, we're going to turn on the Moose 2 system stabilization, aileron trimmers and such, and the GIC and AGI, which is your HSI and ADI over here. Once they're turned on, and you're having power into them, you want to push and hold this to align it for a couple seconds. It'll take about a couple minutes for this to go through its alignment. I also like to go over here and hold down the GIC stabilization button as well, just so I know that's working good well. Now, to go through the engine startup, we're going to first supply fuel to the engines by turning on the pumps. You've got 4 pumps. Pump 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now they're all 4 on. Now you're going to make sure that you have your flight instrument and cockpit heating turned on. You're going to make sure your anti-skid's on. You're going to turn the engine start system on and the fire warning system. So all those switches need to be on. And when you're getting ready to start again, you're going to go over here and turn on your left and right generators for the engines so that when they start spinning, you have aircraft power and you're not on battery power or ground power anymore. So that's set. We're ready to start the engine. Now I have this set to my throttle, but basically you either hold down your Alt Home or whatever you set it to in your keybinds, but you want to advance the left throttle, which is this one, to the idle position. Okay? Once it's in the idle position and those other switches are set to on, you can uncover the engine start, press and hold it for 2 to 3 seconds, and your engine will start to spin up, as you can see here. I'm going to replace that cover, and we're going to monitor these gauges here. At first, your low hydraulics, or your generator light will turn off on your left engine. Followed later on when it reaches its idling RPM, the low oil pressure light will go off. The hydraulic low pressure will stay on until the right engine's fully functional as well. Your RPM should climb initially pretty quickly up to the 30,000 mark, and then it should slowly climb to about the 4,000 mark, just a little bit above, and should hang there. And you want to monitor your temperature, and it should be around 600 degrees Celsius. So we'll just sit here and wait for that for a minute here. Okay, now the low oil pressure light's gone off. It's around 4,000 RPM, and we're still not above 600 degrees Celsius. Here we're good to go. It's idling and stable. Now we can tell the ground crew to disconnect the ground power if we have ground power going already, which we do. So we can do that.
Отключить питание. Принял.
Now we just go through the same starting
Командир, наземное питание отключено.
for the right engine. So we're going to set this to idle, the right throttle, and we're going to hold down the start button for 2 to 3 seconds. And replace the cover. As you can see, the RPM starting to climb. We're going to watch this as well as this. Make sure the rest of these lights go off. It'll take a little bit, but they'll go off. But they should stabilize about the same readings on both engines. case you were wondering or didn't pay attention, you see this little, it's like a rectangular-ish symbol on the indicators for the RPM. The innermost one is for your right engine, the outermost is for your left engine. So when they're swinging around here, you can tell which one's doing what. While the left one is the outer one, and the right one is the inner one. Okay, so our lights, our indicator lights have gone off. It's stably idling around 4,000, and we're not above 600 Celsius on our temperatures. Okay, at this time, we're going to do some engine tests. For this to work without getting into too much problem, we have our wheel chocks on because it starts that way. We also want to enable our front wheel braking system. So we're going to turn it up to engage it, and then we're going to hold down our brake, and we're going to advance both throttles for this one to 10,000 RPM, and we're going to let it sit there at 10,000 RPM for about 30 to 40 seconds to warm up. It's really touchy, at least right now pre-release, at about 10,000 RPM. So careful, don't swing it too fast there, you'll overshoot it. I like to watch my clock. So when I got it advanced, it was about at the 12 mark. So we're going to wait till it's at the 10 mark to let it warm up here. While it's warming up, we're going to watch to make sure the temperature stays generally pretty stable. If you want to make sure that your brake pneumatics are working, this is the gauge for your brake pneumatics right there. I'll show you once I turn the throttle back off. Okay, so it's been about 40 seconds. We'll return to idle. Wait for the RPM to roll down a little bit, and I'll turn off the brake here, and you'll see the pneumatic gauge go. See? Okay, that's for your braking system. Okay. Now that we know it's warmed up, we're going to test both engines at the same time for operation nominally without afterburner. So we're going to make sure this is pressed in. Okay, we're going to hold the brake down, and we're going to advance this slowly to full throttle. We're going to watch the RPMs to stabilize between 11,000 and 11,200 RPM, and we're going to make sure that our engine temperature doesn't climb above 650 degrees Celsius. We can let it sit there for a minute to stabilize. Looks like it's pretty stable. We're good to go. So we're going to bring it back to idle again. The next engine test, we're going to test afterburners. And as I said before, with the cutoff switches, I'm not sure exactly if that's going to prevent it, but we're going to hit our afterburner button here. And then we're going to advance our left throttle slowly to full. Now, when we did our last test, you'll notice that these two lamps above the RPM turned on when we got to full power. Oh, they didn't. That would be because that. So I turned them on. Notice how it came on this time, and the afterburner came on. If you want to go outside, push the afterburner right along. It's stabilized. It's not above 680 degrees Celsius, and the RPM is stable. So let's back that off to idle, and then we'll switch it off and do the right engine. Okay, so let it put that down, and we're going to slowly advance the right engine. It's going to stabilize between 11,000 11,200 RPM. We don't want it to go above 680 degrees Celsius. The military power light comes on, and the afterburner light comes on. If it's stable, back off to idle again. Okay, that's our engine test. you can let go of the brake now. Now we're going to go through a range test for the rudder. Now you can do this from the external view to verify our rudder is working. Ailerons. Elevator. And our air brakes. Extend. In the cockpit, you'll notice that the air brake deploy is on. If you bring it back in, that should extinguish. It should go up, back up. Now we're going to go through the range of motion on our flaps. It's reset when it starts. I go to first to up, verify they're up. I go to takeoff, verify they're going to take off. Go to landing, verify they're going to land. Go back to takeoff, and then back to up. So we know that our flaps are working. Now we're going to test the trim. Now notice I said there were trim lights. There's one here and one here. When you do your trim, you want to test your trim's working properly. So I'm going to go all the way to the left, and the light's going to go off. I'm going to bring it back to the right. It's going to turn on when it goes to neutral, and then off when it goes past neutral, and then I'll put it back to neutral. So here we go. Left, back to right, back to neutral. Same for the elevator. Up, down, back to up to neutral. That's our trim test. Now, before we get ready to take off, you want to just, again, check. This is your ARU stabilization system. This is the gauge for it. This light is lit up when it's in takeoff and landing configuration. It should be that way if you start up that way. And when you get ready to land, it should turn on when you're getting ready to land. But you want to check that light. At that point, we're pretty much ready to taxi to take off. So we're going to tell our ground crew to remove the chocks. You can hold the brakes down if you'd like.
Убрать колодки. Принял. Командир, колодки убраны.
Okay, we're going to close the cockpit. I like to keep the cockpit ends talking. That's just me. So close the cockpit. It's going to lock. And then we're going to set pressurization on, and we're going to close the ventilation. At this time, we can contact the tower and let them know we're ready to taxi the runway.
Бандерлинге, 100-й, запуск.
Request startup. I know I requested it before. He didn't answer. I don't know if I set the radio properly here.
Бандерлинге, 100-й, запуск.
Well, we're going to pretend I did. I don't know what I didn't set the radios properly in the presets for the mission. They give us permission to taxi. They're going to tell us to taxi to runway 26. So we're going to go ahead here and set this to 26 so that we know we're on the proper runway when we get there, and we can maintain runway heading. We're going to turn the nose braking off so we have differential braking as we taxi to the runway. If you haven't already, you can turn the afterburners on if you plan on using afterburners, or you can set it to limit your afterburners. I normally don't turn that on unless I know I need afterburners, so I don't accidentally gun it into afterburners and dump fuel. We're going to set our flaps to takeoff configuration. At this point in time, I like to enable some of these other systems. You want to turn on your pitot and backup pitot heater. We're going to turn on Okay, so we're going to turn on our ASP5N sight, the heater for it, and the Emerald radar system. These switches are for your rocket pods and your two guns, and this is for your cockpit gun camera and your external gun camera. If you want to use those, you can turn those on. Those weapons are actually managed right here. When I turn on the Emerald radar system, I set this up in a standby, so it takes about 2 to 3 minutes to warm up. You don't actually want to turn this on until you're ready to engage, because it overheats pretty quickly. You don't have a lot of time, kind of like in the MiG-21. So I set standby. When I'm ready to use it, I use it. When I'm not, it just sits in standby. And then I do a quick check, verify everything's where it's supposed to be. Turn on my NDBs. Oh, by the way, NDB has, your navigation is 2 NDBs. You've got near and far. These are preset for me in this mission. Far is this airfield. Near is a mission airfield that I have set for this map. But if you want to set your range for your near NDB, it's over here. And for your far NDB, it's right here. And then you tune both of them on this side once they're set, but you can only tune when it's set to antenna. You put it to compass here and it reads on here. So there we go. So we're ready to roll out. If you'd like, you can, if you're going to be using your gun or your rockets, you can set your wingspan stuff here before you take off, so you don't have to fumble with it while you're in flight. Your bombing angle, dive angle here in degrees. I think these are 10s, by the way, 10 degrees, 20 degrees, and so on. And then you want to make sure that your sight is caged for takeoff and landing for sure, or else you'll damage the gyros here. We're going to turn on our navigation lights and our taxi lights, and we're going to take off. So we're going to hold the brake down, advance the throttle to 10,000 RPM, and as I say that, right now the MiG-19 is really sensitive around just above 10,000 and around 10,000, so it's easy to overshoot. Plus the differential in power between just before 10,000 and 10,000 is quite a bit different, so you got to be careful. You have to hold, like with most older Russian jets, you have to hold the brake down and turn your rudder pedals to go in that direction. The brake activates the differential steering, so I'm starting to kind of nose that way. But 10,000 will allow you to start rolling. You can back it off a little bit, but you have to hold the brake down when you're ready to change the turn. Okay. And also, if you let it sit at 10,000 RPM like they tell you in the training mission, you'll have to tap this on and off to keep a decent speed, or you'll get going too fast. It's kind of a pain in the butt. You'll notice my nose pull down every time I put the brakes on. So I can steer. As I'm taking off from Bandar Lenga in Iran, I've got to taxi down at the end of the runway to line up. Now, as we get ready to take off, we're going to line up with the runway, and then we're going to advance the throttle to about 10,000, holding the brake. And then we're going to release the brake and start rolling, and then you're going to slowly advance the throttle forward as you desire to have it. I usually advance it to about 11,000 RPM. Some people go full afterburner. I prefer not, because it dumps fuel really fast. When you reach about 200 kilometers per hour, you're going to rotate, and your nose will slowly lift off. You want to pull your nose up and then gently ride it forward a little bit so you don't take off too sharply. And then once you're at least 8 meters above the ground, you're going to retract your landing gear. And then once your landing gear up, you're going to retract your flaps. Okay, that's good enough for government work right there. Okay, so we're going to vent. We're already at 10,000 RPM. We notice we're on the right runway because we're on the right heading there. So we're going to release the brake, start rolling forward, and slowly advance the throttle a little bit. I like to 11,000, a little bit over 11,000. Then you're going to watch your speed there, right here, 200, and you have to use your rudder, by the way. 200 kilometers per hour, you're going to rotate. Once you start to lift your nose up, just kind of hold it until you get a positive rate. Maintain runway heading. Okay, retract the gear. And then set your flaps back to up. Now another thing I like to do is once that's done is set this locking mechanism back into place. And there we go. We've taken off. Roll out, climb to altitude, and do it whatever it is that you planned on doing. I hope this was informative. I hope it helped. Hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.